It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and this is a second try at my introduction for this guest today. I'm sitting here with the lovely Kinya Christian. She's the CEO, designer, and artist of the 4209 Creative, and she is a local Northwest Arkansas resident and an artist. And I got connected with Kinya because I reached out to some folks at the Rogers-Lowell Chamber of Commerce, and Karen Wagaman was kind enough to connect with me. And we talked a while back, and Karen said one day she'll be on the podcast to talk about Rogers and Lowell and all the great things that are happening in that area. But she reached out to me the other night during the Super Bowl and said, I've got somebody I think you need to interview. And that's when she introduced me to Kinya. That's when she introduced me to the 1619 art project that she's working on here locally. And when she mentioned 1619, which I'm familiar with because it was an outstanding collection of essays, a collection of articles that were featured in the New York Times, and also became a podcast that originally started on The Daily, which is the New York Times daily podcast. And then it morphed into its own podcast called 1619. And that podcast has been widely heralded and received. And in 2019, I believe that was one of the most listened to short form series podcasts, because it's only a couple of episodes, but it's absolutely amazing. And we'll put the link to the 1619 podcast and to the daily in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself. But without further ado, Kinya Christian, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny because I was telling Kinya that for all of my regular listeners, I very rarely make the mistake of not hitting record, but I didn't hit record, and she was saying such great things. So I was like, okay, we'll rewind this and do it over again. And the only reason why I'm sharing this is because nothing in life is perfect, and you're going to make mistakes. And I always remind my listening audience that, you just got to go out there and get 1% better each day. And so even sometimes in the throes of things, you forget to hit record. So note to self, don't forget to hit record, especially if you're going to record some amazing people like Miss Christian. So why don't you tell our listening audience a little bit, give them a little taste of your superhero origin story and how you ended up here in Northwest Arkansas.
I like that superhero. So I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, specifically the suburb of Independence. And as I mentioned to you previously, people think of the Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs, coming from Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah. But actually, if you ask the people who live in Independence, will tell you it's actually Independence.
And there's a lot of pride in your voice. I mean, your boys did what hadn't been done in 50 years. So
they did. And I've been hardcore Chiefs fan. I mean, I was born a Chiefs fan. So.
Right. So that's all you know.
That's all I know.
Yeah. So and we have a lot of lists. I mean, that was the thing when I first moved here. I recognized that if you're not from Northwest Arkansas and you come here, there's pretty much two camps. You're either a Dallas Cowboys fan for a lot of people. There's a small camp of people that were originally St. Louis Rams fans, but when they left St. Louis, like I have one friend that's from St. Louis and he's like, the Rams are dead to me. So I don't even acknowledge the folks out in California. And then, of course, you have a lot of Chiefs fans.
Yes.
And so yeah, this is kind of like Chiefs Nation South, if you will.
Yes. And it's wonderful to see how everyone has embraced the Chiefs. At first, I was a little jealous. I'm like, wait a minute, these are my Chiefs. But
right.
No, we share them with everyone. Patrick is a special guy, very talented.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with the way he plays and with the, Andy Reid being a coach, and I'm so glad I always thought he was a really good guy, and just the way he's handled everything when he was with the Eagles, the problems that he had with his two boys, and just everything about him struck me as just being a really good guy. So I'm happy that he got his first Lombardi trophy after all these years. So, that's, I think that's a perfect testament to the fact that you don't ever give up.
Yes, absolutely.
You keep going.
Exactly that. And that it kind of speaks to a little bit more of my personal story, really. You just keep going until you don't give up. And having moved from the inner city, Kansas City, as a young married couple with a little baby. My parents moved into Independence during a time where you would think, this is late 70s, early 80s. We've gotten past the neighborhood moving away when a Black family moves in, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
That happened to them, and they had to deal with that. And then having their 2 little girls go to an elementary school there and being amongst the first Black students there, they had to deal with that too. Mm-hmm. And they did a wonderful job of raising my sister and myself to not become hardened by that, not to have a chip on your shoulder behind that. And all gratitude goes to them for raising us to be well-rounded and have a love of everyone and to still see good in people.
I think you also mentioned fueled by optimism.
Optimism. That people can still be that, and they just have to be taught.
Right.
And racism, I say this a lot, is a trauma.
Yeah.
Really. Absolutely. It is absolutely a trauma. And pulling in the art piece of this, I have a lot of my family members are very creative people. My father is creative. He drew murals on our wall freehand and colored them in, and he made clothes for us. He made, really, Dad was the homemaker. Mm-hmm. He made my mom a dress. That was something that he did, and that passes that down to us. His love of all forms of music, that comes from him. I played the alto sax all through high school, and every once in a while I fiend for it.
Yeah,
I haven't pulled it out in quite a while, but
you still have one.
I still have one.
Okay, good.
And I still enjoy that. That all came, that creative sense, that sense of exploration. I think I mentioned to you that growing up, I wanted to be an astronomer. That wasn't going to be possible because I had more of that artistic streak in me.
Right.
And I wanted to explore that, and my parents allowed me to.
Yeah.
And so when I got married at a very young age, not young, I was 23 years old. But that move, that's what brought me here to Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
And when I left Kansas City, I'd worked for a yearbook publishing company as a temp, and I loved it. And I said, you know what? I want to go into publishing. I changed my mind. This is what I want to do. So I come to Northwest Arkansas, and I get in with the printer, worked for a printer for a period of time. And then I went for a sign shop. And then I worked for a trade show exhibit company. Then I worked for a company that did product design and product development, marketing for Walmart vendors. And then from there, I went and worked for a full service ad agency where I was thrown into a world of learning TV and radio and web design and other forms of print that I had never explored before. And that whole, very creative career, very broad career in a 20-year time span. And until recently, I hadn't really pursued my art professionally outside of digital, right?
Sure.
And in the last 12 years, I've been pursuing that outside of digital, and I'm loving it.
How would you rate, Northwest Arkansas as a place in terms of whether it stifles creativity or encourages creativity from an artistic perspective?
Depends on who you are. I know it's kind of a loaded question and not really answering the question, but me personally, I don't think it stifled my creativity, but it certainly hasn't fostered a professional career as an artist, as a local artist. I feel like the arts are starting to are here in Northwest Arkansas. I'm absolutely here because of Crystal Bridges, but I feel like a lot of people are bringing in artists instead of grooming or taking care of the arts that are here on the ground.
Yeah,
that's what I think is lacking.
Right. And I think the momentary obviously is going to play a huge part in that, because now you're going to create, you've essentially created a new platform where you can give people that are local an opportunity to develop their craft. And as I think about this, I just sat down recently with the folks from Theater Squared, which is a local production company. And they are big on trying to get local people to be part of their productions. And so I see that as these are newer outlets where this creativity is being allowed, where necessarily, Theater Squared, I guess, maybe wasn't around when you first moved here, but it has developed.
Well, one of the organizations that was here when I got here was known as Rogers-Lowell Theater.
Okay.
And it's downtown Rogers, and it's community theater. And all of the people, from the ushers to set builders to the actors, the performers, are all volunteer.
Yeah.
Completely 100% volunteer organization at the time. I mean, it was a dinner theater. So even the people that came in to serve the food, the caterers, they got paid, but they were pretty much the only ones. Right. They had a theater manager and that was it. So the getting rights to plays and all that came from the support of patrons coming to see the shows and then donors. But that organization has grown by leaps and bounds. And I've been so fortunate to be part of it. I was a board member for a period of time. I've volunteered there, cleaning bathrooms and ushering in people and making sure food is set up properly, to working on the actual marketing and helping them rebrand themselves as Arkansas Public Theater.
Okay.
And now they've grown. They've got an executive director and a theater manager. Hello. So they've got some 2 paid positions.
Yeah, exactly.
But to see that evolve, to see the organization evolve, and like you say, they need community involvement.
Absolutely.
That's so important.
Yeah. So, and I love that. And that's one of the reasons why, again, the whole idea behind I Am Northwest Arkansas is to really talk about all the things that make this area great. You've got the businesses, you've got the culture, right? Which includes the arts. You have entrepreneurship, and then you have just life in general. So, there's so much that we could obviously talk about, but I really want to kind of hone in on this event coming up. You're working on a project, and I would love for you to share with this audience exactly, just give them a little, I guess, view into the 1619 project from your perspective and what you're hoping to accomplish with this art exhibit. And then we'll go over the particulars about where it will be and all of that coming up starting next week.
Right. So I was introduced to the 1619 project, first of all, through Facebook.
Okay.
I was seeing a lot of sponsored content, but I didn't click through on it because I thought it was going to be more of what I already knew of the year 1619. This is not a new idea. But then Gwen Kelly, who veteran in multicultural marketing and diversity, equity, and inclusion, consulting with several different companies and interning with some different projects, and familiar with the area. She lived here for 12 years,
right,
working for a company that recruited her specifically for that. But she reached out to me and she said, have you looked at this? I think that I want to see this introduced in Northwest Arkansas, and maybe in a dramatic fashion,
right?
A dramatic reading, a dramatic play. How could we bring this to life? And I said, well, hold that thought. Let me check this out, because you're talking to me about it. I've seen it on Facebook. Let me take time to read it. And much like you, I was shook.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is information that I've always known, but the way that Nicole Hannah-Jones put this together it was mind-blowing.
Yeah, it was. And for the listeners, Nicole Hannah-Jones is an award-winning writer, reporter at the New York Times. And also, just for reference, just because some people are listening like, what is 1619 and the significance of it? And a lot of people ask that question, and the significance is simply that was the beginning or the first time that Africans were brought over as slaves to the United States. And so they celebrated 400 years since Africans set foot here on the soil in the United States. And so that's the whole significance behind when you hear people say 1619, it's a date, almost akin to the date when the Pilgrims landed here.
Absolutely. So. And I was going to say that a lot of people talk about the year 1619 and want to discount it, but no one discounts when the Mayflower got here. A year later.
Yeah.
So we can't discount what happened in 1619 and the effects that are still being felt today.
Yeah.
And so having read that project, and I became Gwen's biggest cheerleader. I'm like, let's go, let's do it, let's bring it here. But, there's always constraints to bringing something of that magnitude the way you envision it.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to work within those constraints, I said, what if we did something a little bit smaller? She said, well, let's think about it. we'll see what comes up. And sure enough, I participated in Art on the Bricks every second Thursday of each month. The Rogers-Lowell Chamber of Commerce supports this. Art on the Bricks is a program to bring people downtown Rogers and to highlight art in several different locations. And the Rogers Experimental House invited me and so about 20 other artists to come. It's kind of their opening celebration to the year.
Sure. And it's Black History Month.
Well, in January, when she first, approached me to show my art, I said, absolutely. So I participated in that. And then at that event in January, I said to her, what if we brought in emerging artists, specifically Black artists, to help celebrate Black History Month? And she's like, oh my goodness, yes. Okay, you're on it. Tag, you're it. And I said, okay.
You were probably like, man, did I just say that?
A little bit I did, a little bit. But like at the outset, I said previously on my website, I described myself as a jack of all trades, trying to master at least one.
Right. You're doing a good job, though.
So I thought, well, okay, here we go. Let's do this. Just jump in with both feet. That's how I do things. And so I did. But I thought, the light bulb went off. I said, this is it. Gwen, this is where we introduced Northwest Arkansas to the year 1619.
Absolutely.
We're going to do it in the framework of artwork, because you think about when you go to a gallery or a museum, you're allowed to stand quietly and reflect on that piece of artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe read a little bit about that artwork. And you're doing that internally. You're having that conversation within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk away and you're still being affected by that, right? So I thought this is a way for people to learn about the 1619 project, learn about the year 1619 and the effects of it still felt today, where they can go up and read it and silently have that conversation with themselves.
Yeah.
All right. They don't have to have a sit down face to face where they feel uncomfortable talking about it. They don't have to feel bombarded or attacked for what they may be thinking or how they want to react to what they're being told. They can just sit and read it. And then they can be inspired or moved by the artwork from local artists here in Northwest Arkansas who are also appreciating this culture, specifically Black American culture here. And Gwen, bless her heart, she said, this should be opened up to not just Black artists or people of color.
Mm-hmm.
You need to open this up to everyone.
Right.
And so I said, you know what? You're right. Let's everyone. And it goes back to what I've always known to be true, is that there's inherent good in people.
Absolutely.
And that there are other people out there who are sincere and who appreciate this culture and who may want to know more about this history. So let's invite everybody. So there are artists out of the 11 artists that I believe that I've gotten so far, because I'm still getting artists that want to participate. It's like I'm working on this thing, and I still have people coming and wanting to be part of it. But it's a pretty split down the middle.
Nice. Okay.
Of Black artists and white artists. And the artwork is beautiful, all of it. And it fits perfectly. All of the excerpts I've chosen from the essays we received approval to use match up with the artwork. I could not be more happy with how this is going to turn out.
Wow. That's awesome.
And people can come in and, like I say, they can learn about this and they can reflect quietly and I hope that they take away something that they didn't know before, be inspired by it, and talk about it with others.
Yeah.
And for the artists that have participated, that talk back at the end of the month, I want to give them an opportunity to express why they got involved in this, why they said, you know what, yes, I want to participate in this, and what they hope to accomplish by being part of it. Right. What do they want people to walk away when they put their artwork out there? Now, what do they want in return?
Yeah.
And more than that, as a community of artists locally, what would we like to see? How would we like this to continue to go forward? And that's ultimately what I want. I want a permanent place for this type of artwork to be seen all the time, a permanent place for these pieces of the 1619 project to be framed up with the artwork, where businesses and organizations and students can come in and learn about it and get connected with their artistic community here. Not just a passing exhibit.
Yeah.
But a permanent place.
Yeah. And speaking of a passing exhibit, so that the idea is that this is going to be on location at the Rogers Experimental House.
Yes.
Until the end of February.
And then it goes to the Rogers Historical Museum until the end of March.
So that you'll have, those of you listening right now, this episode's going to come out just a couple of days before the grand presentation of the 1619 project here in Northwest Arkansas. You'll have some time, even after this podcast episode has aired, to check it out, whether at the Experimental House or at the Rogers Historical Museum. And then if you're listening to this after the fact, so like in April or May or maybe even sometime next year, you'll have information in the show notes where you can reach out and connect with Kinya and learn more about what she's doing and where, if anything, this particular installation is, and if it has a permanent home. You'll learn more about that. And then if nothing else, I think one of the reasons why I didn't want to necessarily get into all the particulars of the 1619 project and kind of rehash exactly what's discussed specifically on the podcast or through the essays or the articles is because I would encourage all of my listeners to check it out for yourself. I don't even think I could do it justice by talking about it. I think obviously from an artistic perspective, Kinya and her team and all these amazing artists are going to give it their perspective from an artistic standpoint. But I think just to understand the historical significance of that date and what it means to this country, black and white, I would encourage you, I'll put the link on the show notes, go listen to the podcast and form your own opinions based on the information that's shared. It is, I think I've listened to it 3 times and several episodes. It's all I can say is that it's deep. I think the first time I listened to it, I cried a little bit just listening to the stories, and it's told through the lens of the lives of several black families through those 400-year periods and things that this is all accurate historical fact. This is not conjecture or this is one person's opinion or somebody. This is all documented fact that is discussed in here. So it's just the idea that, those that forget their history are doomed to repeat it. And, I think in our country, we're all in this together. And so the more that we can understand historical significance and context, I think the better off that we will be, especially when it comes to our relationships, because we all have to live here on this tiny planet. And I think it's incumbent upon us to work as hard as we can to try to understand each other. I always like how Brene Brown talks about looking at some. You don't really talk to somebody. It's one thing to talk to someone. Most of the times we're talking over somebody or past them. But when you really stop to look into somebody's eyes and understand them, understand where they came from, understand their historical proximity to you and just the relationships that exist there, I think it's important. So, I think we need to do more of that. And I get it that, for some of you listening, this might be a little bit more touchy-feely because I talk about barbecue and I talk about entrepreneurship and business.
Wait. Now you talk about barbecue.
No, but
listen.
So, let me finish my thought.
Okay.
So, no, I'm just saying, I talk about some weighty subjects. I talk about some light subjects. I just think it's in the context of things. What Northwest Arkansas has meant to me and means to me is that there are so many different factors that play into what I believe makes this place a great place. And just the fact that you're doing what you're doing is symbolic to me to that end, right?
Absolutely. And let me speak to that because I think about, so I've been involved with any parts of Rogers since I got here. Okay. First off, getting involved with working with the Rogers Little Theater. And then I actually worked on the marketing for the city of Rogers before it even had a Convention and Visitors Bureau. Mm-hmm. So when it was just the Rogers A&P Commission, I sat in on those meetings.
Yeah.
I learned what was going on, what was happening with the city and how they were trying to brand themselves. What were they? What are they? Who is Rogers? And I worked on those. Yeah. I sat in on focus groups trying to figure out what Rogers brand is. Bentonville has its identity. Springdale has an identity. Fayetteville has an identity. Where does Rogers fit in on that? And to your point, with Northwest Arkansas being a unique place, I feel like Rogers is the most unique of them all because it's everything. Rogers is groundbreaking. Rogers is forward thinking. Rogers has been a place that has fostered my creativity, to be sure. And all of the leadership over the years, specifically at the Rogers-Lowell Chamber of Commerce, has been nothing but supportive of me and what my endeavors are. And this project is no different.
Yeah.
They completely embraced it. And I'm so excited to see where Rogers goes with this project and really with developing its art and culture scene, because I feel like it's coming.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I've actually was involved with a Rogers. They have a project called, I don't know if it's called Project 2030, but it's their focus on where is Rogers going to be in the next 10 years.
Yes.
And, what are going to be the things that are going to allow Rogers to really evolve and grow? I mean, Rogers has a very diverse community.
Yeah.
I mean, there are just a lot of questions about how they do it. And I commend Rogers for being at the forefront of that and not just, kind of like waking up one day like, oh my gosh, we never thought of this. It's like they're actually doing things. But I would say every city here in Northwest Arkansas is progressive from that standpoint. And I think that's important, especially people that are listening to this that may be thinking about relocating here. Maybe Tyson's on your radar or JB Hunt's on your radar or Walmart's on your radar and you're thinking about coming here to work, or you just realize that this is such a very rich environment for corporate employment. This place is on the move. It's, as I like to say, it's on the come up. I mean, this is not your grandfather's Northwest Arkansas. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing. It's just no place ever stays the same. It does change and evolve over time. And I just think that this is actually a fairly progressive area and it continues to evolve and we'll just keep getting better every day. That's like one of my mottos is get 1% better every day.
Yes.
And I think Northwest Arkansas is doing a great job of that. And Rogers is especially doing that. So
yes, and to your point about, just kind of backtrack a little bit on the 1619 project, I appreciated that you said that, you and I sitting here today could not do it justice, but encouraging people to go out and do a little bit more and dig a little bit deeper and read that project, because what will overcome the fear that fuels racism is knowledge.
Yeah.
When you realize and understand and believe that knowledge is power, that's where we go from here.
Absolutely.
You've got to get past the fear and the apprehension and teach yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really, really important.
And then you have to have a heart that's receptive.
Yeah.
Right? Your heart has to be in a place where you're willing to take it in and learn from it and not be hardened. You don't want to have a hard heart. What does that say about you going forward as a person, as a human being, just making it through life?
Yeah.
Soften that heart up, allow it to be receptive and take the knowledge in, and you're going to grow. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think, and that's a perfect point, because I mean, I'm constantly looking for the best in everyone. And I think that just because that's my focus, and I have friends that they look at the worst in everybody. And it's, some people and people listening to this know exactly what I'm talking about. You have friends that their focus is always negative. Then you have some friends that their focus is always positive, or how do I get to that positive place? And so that's kind of where I am. And I think that the world could be a much better place if we would just start looking at the glass as half full as opposed to half empty.
Exactly. And to that point, the idea of cultural appropriation, I spoke to this in another interview where I said, to me, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Right. And it doesn't matter, even if you try to repackage it or whitewash it, the fact is that you loved it just the way it was. Right.
Yeah.
And you can't erase that.
Yeah.
Deep down inside, you liked it just the way it was.
Right.
And that's all that I need to see. However you want to, the way you want to express that, that's on you. But don't try to front.
Yeah.
And go ahead and do that.
Right.
But we really know. And instead of trying to repackage it or whitewash it or put it in a different way, just go ahead and embrace it. And then guess what happens? Then people will come to you and they will say, thank you for doing that. thank you for expressing your love and appreciation for all that is, whatever that culture is.
Right.
Be it, Black or Hispanic or Marshallese, I don't care what it is.
Absolutely.
And then when you think about the love you will get if you just let it go.
Exactly. It's so funny. You brought that up. And so I will air some of my own experiences growing up. It's kind of like I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I can remember listening to groups like, and I don't know, because I think it's because my father just had a very eclectic music palette.
Okay, let's hear it.
Everything,
because that's my dad.
I would listen to like Ambrosia and some old school stuff, but it wasn't like traditional things. So like a lot of my friends, I had Black and white friends, but my Black friends would be like, "Why are you listening to that white music?" And I'm like, "Dude, this music is good." And then when I started listening to Boston and Led Zeppelin and all this other stuff, and then
Pink Floyd,
and then people would be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You don't understand." But I can imagine that would be the same way that a young white boy a young white kid might be listening to rap, or Tribe Called Quest back in the 90s, and didn't want to let all his friends know that he liked that music. And it's just like, it's just music, and it's not white or black. It's an expression of art. It's an expression of that particular artist, how they saw the world and what they were sharing. And I just, as you say that, it just reminds me, it creates a level of equality that we need to try to aspire to.
Right.
Where we don't look at it through the lens of black or white. It's just, this is just great art. This is great music.
Right.
And I love this.
And then too, when you start breaking down those artistic styles, when you look and peel back all the layers of the history, and you see that some of that had its beginnings with slaves that showed up here in the 1600s and the 1700s.
Absolutely.
Think about what that will do to your worldview. It shouldn't blow your mind. What it should do is help you to appreciate the people who are around you, Black, brown, and in between.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We could certainly go on and on.
My goodness, yes.
There's a lot that I could share. I just wanted to.
Well, see, you named off some of those bands. You got it. My dad raised me on the Beatles.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love the Beatles too.
Oh my goodness.
I love the Beatles too. But my father was like a Three Dog Night, Ambrosia,
mine too, right?
Doobie Brothers kind of person. So
right, CCR.
Yeah.
We could go on and on.
I could go back to
remember that group Traffic
and Mandrill.
Oh.
So, and then it's
Crosby,
so funny.
Stills, and Nash.
Man,
and Young.
And it's so funny. I went to see Santana when he came to the AMP this past year, and I was blown away. And big shout out to a friend of mine who took me to that concert, and it was just, it was so cool to see all the people in that audience.
How about Chicago? Look, every time Chicago has been here, I have been here.
So yeah, that's funny.
And I did get my tickets to Steely Dan as well.
Oh, that's right, Steely Dan and
Steve Winwood.
Steve Winwood, right? So yeah, so that's going to be a great event at the AMP in June. And actually, I will put a link in the show notes for those of you that listen to this before June. You should check out that Doobie Brothers concert because it's going to be, Steely Dan concert because it's going to be outstanding.
Yes.
So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, no, man, listen. All right. So here's the deal. Those of you that are listening to this podcast, especially if you're listening to it right as it comes out, because I know I have some hardcore listeners, I really want you to make it down to the inaugural event for this. The Art Walk Rogers, the actual first day is what day? For
February 13th.
Okay.
It's a Thursday night. It kicks off. The doors are open 4:00, and some of the artists will be there at 4:45 or thereabout. The Arkansas Arts Academy 5th and 6th grade dance troupe will perform.
Yes. My kids go to that school.
Cece Finley is, oh my goodness, she reached out to me. She heard about this project. She heard about the exhibit and said, I want in.
Okay. That's awesome.
So they're going, and talk about getting emotional watching something. I have to admit, she sent me videos of these girls dancing, and I got a little emotional.
Yeah,
watching the girls dance because they were so into it and loving it. And I'm like, oh yes, please get as many of those kids rounded up and bring them down.
Listen, AAA, as I like to call it, or better known as the Arkansas Arts Academy, has some super talented young people there, both in the lower school and in the upper school. And the only thing that I'm sorry about with regard to this date is that I will physically be out of town speaking at an event. Otherwise, I would be there with bells on. But I want some of my listeners, my I Am Northwest Arkansas listeners, to do me proud by showing up at this event, by tracking Kinya down and saying, hey, I heard about you from that podcast with Randy. I really liked it, and I wanted to come down here and support you.
And listen, if that's not enough, Torchy's is bringing out their queso that night. Okay.
There we go. So
Torchy's will be there.
Torchy's queso's on point.
It's on point. Yes. So come check it out.
Exactly.
We're open in Fayetteville and
they
Rogers.
have one in Rogers. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Right across from the top where the new Top Golf is.
Yes.
So,
yes, sir. That queso's on point. It will be there. And also, I'm going to have some of my favorite wines there.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Real quickly, you are studying to be a sommelier.
Yes.
And for those that aren't as cultured, and I'm not including myself in that group, but I mean, if you are a sommelier, you are a special individual, and so Kinya is working towards that, and there's a lot to be said for just being able to ascertain the great things in life, like a good wine, a good bourbon, a good cigar. And I mean, there's something to be said for that. And we may have to have another episode to kind of talk about that.
I would love to talk about that.
Because there are, when you talk about the finer things of Northwest Arkansas and people like to imbibe from time to time, and they like to take in that stuff there's just so much going on here, and it's hard to keep track of it. But I didn't want to talk too much about it with this particular episode, but we're going to have to put a pin in it and come back and talk about your life as a up-and-coming sommelier.
Yes, up-and-coming, in training. In fact, that'll be good to come back, because I'll be making my next my yearly trip out to Napa in a couple of weeks, actually. Okay. So
good. After you do all this stuff.
After I do all this stuff, I'll be ready.
Yeah, you will be ready for a glass of wine. That is for sure. So, well, Kinya, it has been nothing short of a pleasure to have you on the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I really appreciate it. You certainly do embody what Northwest Arkansas is all about, at least in my book, but as well as in the books of a lot of other people that I've talked to that listen to this podcast and are really inspired and encouraged by what we're trying to do here. So please keep doing what you're doing. Kinya Christian, again, is a CEO, designer, and artist at 4209 Creative. And you can also catch her at kinyachristian.com. I'll put links to both of her sites in the show notes. I would certainly like if you can support her, efforts, what she's doing, but also just support the art on the bricks with the Rogers-Lowell Chamber of Commerce. They do a lot of work with that. My kids and my wife and I went down there this summer and went into one of the stores that was participating, and we painted some really great pieces of artwork in that. I mean, it was just a lot of fun. See,
I would love to do something like that where we could make it. You hear about these drink and draw, drink and paint, I'm wanting to take that up a notch.
Yeah.
With some of those wine pairings to the type of artwork. I could pair. Let's get it all the way down.
That would be fun.
I'm so glad that you all were able to.
Oh yeah, we did, and we were going, because I told Karen that we were going to do it again, and so it's just, I think people need to know that these events are available, and you should certainly partake of them, and they're free. I mean, that's the other thing too. So the event that I went to 2 different locations. People were serving appetizers, they were serving drinks. I mean, it was really, it was well done. I was very impressed with it. So I certainly want to encourage that. Now, I'll also put a link to the Rogers-Lowell Chamber of Commerce in the show notes. You can check them out, and a link to Karen, since she is the reason why we're even sitting down talking right now. And then we'll just go from there. But any last thoughts before we close?
No, other than thank you.
Absolutely.
For providing the platform for this. And thank you to Northwest Arkansas for being the way that it is.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Inclusive and ready to accept people like myself and you and what we're trying to accomplish here.
Absolutely. Well,
it's making it the good life, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right here. And people say, I laugh all the time. And those of you that listen a lot know I say this. When I tell my friends from back east that I live in Arkansas, or that, they ask me how long you going to live there. I'm like, man, I love it here. It's great. And I could technically live anywhere, but I chose to live here, and I'm staying for a while. It's grown on me. And y'all not going to be able to get rid of me that easy. So notice
well,
how I said y'all. Right?
They haven't gotten rid of me. I've been here 20 years.
There you go. So absolutely. So, well, Kinya, thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I really want to encourage you to come out and be a part of this 1619 event. If you are listening to this after March of 2020, that's okay. Just connect with Kinya online, connect with her website, and in wherever this 1619 program is, we'll make you aware of that. And if nothing else, just connect with the show notes so that you can learn more about the 1619 project, learn more about what Nicole Hannah-Jones was doing with that, and maybe read some of her essays, some of the articles that were written in the New York Times. So I'd really appreciate that. And we would appreciate it that you would just continue to support us in any way that you can. I'd ask you to do one of three things. You can share this podcast with a friend. I'd ask for you to visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com and join our email list so you can get our weekly newsletter. And then I'd also ask, if you get a chance, wherever you listen to this podcast, please write a review and leave a rating and let us know what you think about the podcast, what you like, what you don't like. We've gotten some great reviews, and we want to start reading them on the air. But we would love for you just to kind of share your thoughts and sentiments about what we're doing here with this show. And we're only going to continue to grow. 2020 is going to be an amazing year for us. And we're excited that you've taken time out of your busy day, whether you're on the treadmill, whether you're walking on the Razorback Trail, whether you are riding to work up in Bentonville or wherever you're going, or whether you're somewhere else in the country and you're listening to this podcast, trying to figure out whether or not you need to move here. Do it. Trust me. You'll thank me later. That's all I have for you guys. And I will catch you next week. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.